Hi, members of the public.
Come on up front.
Welcome to the Integrated Delivery Schedule sponsored Task Force sponsored workshop. Come on up front here. We got plenty of seats open up front. Come on up front.
They're scared of us. It's like a university setting.
Come on. This ain't high school. Do I get a gavel? Good afternoon. We're going to get started here. Welcome, everybody, to the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Task Force sponsored public workshop on the integrated delivery schedule here at the South Florida Water Management District. We appreciate the district for providing this venue and the webcast hosting and the facilities and support. This task force, as I mentioned, was a formal request from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at the June 2019 Working Group Science Coordination Group meeting. The IDS is the overall strategy and sequence for planning, design, and construction of federal projects, cost share, and with the local sponsor, including Sept, Kissimmee River Restoration, the Everglades, and Central Florida critical projects. The IDS is based on ecosystem needs, benefits, costs, and available funding. It's a way we message to the public and to each other the order of what we're supposed to be doing. The staff here from the Corps will be providing the background information on the IDS as well as describing the most recent updated efforts in detail. James Erskine, who is the working chair of the working group, will be help with facilitating the workshop along with OERI staff member Alan Childress. James, all yours.
Adam, thank you very much. With that being said, I think Alan's going to go ahead and get us right started here.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you, everyone, for being so polite to me when I was so rude and shushed y'all out of the room earlier. I appreciate your assistance so we could get the room rearranged. F5 still? Yeah. Okay. As Adam just said, this is all focused on the IDS, and we are here to do the one workshop that we have scheduled for this update. And we're using the same model that we have established before, and those of you who have participated in our prior workshops on other subject matters as well. This information is going to get back to the task force as well, to the Corps of Engineers and the Water Management District staff. And this is engineered, as you all can see, you're at the table so we can have some dialogue. You can talk to each other, you can ask questions. This is supposed to be a very interactive session as opposed to just hearing a presentation. So all those questions you might have formed in your minds if you were here at the morning session, now will be the time to ask those questions. Oh, Pete, you're right on top of things. Just to remind everyone of the feedback loop, we take all the information from these workshops, we transmit that information formally in writing with a recording. This is being webcast, and that information goes back to the Corps and the Water Management District in a very formal transmittal. For that formal transmittal, please sign in. If you ran by the sign-in table on the way in, each table has one of these. Please write your name down because that will go into the record on this feedback loop to the Corps and the Water Management District. With that said, again, the mics are on your table. If the green light is on, that means they are live. To conserve their battery strength, You can turn them off when not being used, but just be aware of that and hold any sidebar conversations outside. And that is all I have, except to remind you that the information for this session and the recording, once it is available, will be up on our website, evergladesrestoration.gov. And that is all. Yes.
A question that comes up regularly is, if we had more money, what could we do faster? And I understand that there are some projects that are constrained by just the nature of the construction, that more money doesn't make a difference. But if we could identify those projects which, in fact, if we had additional funding, we could accelerate completion, that would be useful.
Okay.
Pete, that's an excellent comment. And I think as we go through the presentation from the core, that comment could come up again during that presentation. There'll be a couple of breaks in the presentation for the public where our presenter, Ava Valles, will be taking questions. We also have Kim Taplin here at the front desk, at the front table to help out throughout the presentation as is needed. And with that, I think we'll call Ava up. Would you like to use the podium?
Yeah, because I've got.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our public workshop on the working version of the integrated delivery schedule for 2019. Looking around the room, many of you were here this morning, and so I do have a few slides that are intended to be a tutorial, so I may skip a few of those because I'm looking around the room and I think everyone works in our world. So for those of you that are online, just bear with me because I might skip or run through some of them a little faster. So today's workshop is interactive, and you should have a copy of a few handouts. So I want to make sure all of you have 3 placemats for taking notes and asking questions. One of them is the SFER program placemat, which was created last year. If you're curious about it, it's actually on the Army Corps of Engineers ecosystem website. That's one of them that's intended to provide an overview of the program. Another one is the 2018 IDS. And the third one is the working version of the 2019 update. In addition to that, we have a poster of a map of where the projects are. We have facilities maps on the tables, and we also have some of the SISREP reports and also the Everglades report card that was published this year. So all of that is intended to be used in this discussion. The purpose of today's workshop is to educate the public on the process to update the integrated delivery schedule. We want to increase transparency with stakeholders and the project on how projects fit together. This is a common question. What comes first? Where can we have incremental benefits? Where can we have incremental restoration? And if we have to Pete's question earlier, if we have a little bit more money, where should we put it, right? These are common questions. And so I don't know that I will be able to reflect everything today, but I'm going to try. My goal is to help you understand how the projects fit together, because these placemats are full of data. And so I did a shout out to Lieutenant Colonel Todd Polk this morning with his pictures. There's another one. The one that you see here was in his visit to Lake Okeechobee this week. And so just to let you know, I'll try to do that as well. And then a little bit of process. So this is a working version. You are watching all of us work. You're watching us work with the South Florida Water Management District, with DOI, with everyone that's involved, with DEP, and this is a working version. As we talk through it today, as we get more comments, our final will be presented in October 29th at the task force meeting in DC, and we will report on what we heard at that meeting. It's just a little bit of process. So the how and why of restoration program, I'm going to skip right through this one because everyone in here is very familiar, other than to say we have a pre-drainage condition that was altered in order for all of us to live here. And that had unintended consequences to our environment. And then when our environment suffers, our economy suffers, our people suffer, our tribes suffer, and so we try to put together a plan that helps us have compatibility with the human environment and with the natural system that allows us to continue to prosper. And so essentially, that's what this slide is about. The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan was authorized by Congress in 2000. It is a framework. And so one thing that is a takeaway that I hope to make sure that all of you think about as you look at the IDS is that, you know, we had a framework that was authorized by Congress, but every time we actually want to construct something, we need to go back and pick up one of those items on the menu and do a feasibility study and go back to Congress and get it authorized for construction, and then we get construction funding after that. So just wanted to make sure we're all kind of thinking about that. So the goal of SERP is to, again, restore flow in the right quality, quantity, timing, and distribution while maintaining the ability for all of us to live here. And the integrated delivery schedule does have its roots in the Yellow Book. So in the 2000 authorization, there was an implementation plan associated with that Yellow Book that is where the integrated delivery schedule has its roots. And so as that was updated over time, it was acknowledged that we needed to include the foundation projects of which SERP sits on the shoulders of. So that is why we have an integrated delivery schedule. It is to bring things together that SERP depends on, as well as the implementation of SERP. The integrated delivery schedule is a forward-looking document. So when we look at this document today, when we talk about potential effects, or when we try to remember where have we been, remember that this is a document intended to get us all on the same page, literally, of what we're doing next. It is not a summary of the entire program. We just can't fit that on one sheet of paper. And so if you're wondering what happened to a project that used to be on the IDS and it's no longer on there, it's probably because it got done and we did really great, or maybe there's another reason for it, but that's something that is important to consider when you're reviewing the working version of the IDS. It's a living document. It helps us understand how projects fit together and their sequencing and their duration. We don't make official, there's no record of decision that happens as a result of the integrated delivery schedule. It is how we plan on moving forward together as a team. Any questions so far? Another excellent picture of Lake Okeechobee from Lieutenant Colonel Polk. You'll see this picture a few times. This is the eelgrass on the lake this week, right? This week. Okay, so we're gonna, our first interaction, it will be to go to the 2018 IDS. And we're gonna go over a few terms that I know many of you in here already know, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page. I wanna start with a discussion of scale. So sometimes we think, why can't this go faster? Right? Why can't you design faster? Why can't you construct faster? Why can't you buy something faster? And I just wanted to put it in perspective that, so when my husband and I, we live in Port St. Lucie on the Treasure Coast, and my husband and I went to build our own home, and what it took to buy a lot in Port St. Lucie and get plans and then go get our permits from the city and actually get it constructed took us about a year. And so when you look at the scale of what we're all trying to accomplish, just in comparison there in the notes at the bottom, just the C-44 and C-43 that are one line on this IDS each are the size of the city limits of the city of Fort Lauderdale, which are active construction sites, which will hold water, which will provide benefits to our natural system and our human environment. So just when we think, what can we do, why can't we do more, sometimes we need to remember the scale of the work that we're doing. And so the IDS, if you look at the 18, we always try to bring it back to what the Yellow Book component was, except for the items at the top that are in blue, which will be carried over to the 19, which is carried over to the 19 version. And so these are the foundation projects, non-SERP projects, state projects that SERP is dependent upon, which is one of the themes of the 19 update, which is the significant momentum that we have reached in those important foundation projects through 2019 and through 2020. If anybody has any questions on any of these, I can stop, but I kind of am going to roll through in the interest of time. Nope? Okay. So highlights, if you look at 18 on the IDS, a few highlights of what we've accomplished in fiscal year 19. I'm going to start with the publishing of the system status report. On the tables, again, you have a copy of the Everglades report card. There's a website associated with that, and you can look at the system status report as well as the report card, and a lot of great information that our scientific community has put together. That was published this year. In construction, we met incredibly important milestones, if you look at the top left, in projects like Kissimmee River, C111 South Date especially, and Picayune Strand has continued. IRL South C44 Reservoir has made incredible progress. So just the list goes on of everything that we've done together in fiscal year 19. One of the items to the right, including, which is some of the non-SERP projects, I want to make sure I talk a lot about Tamiami Trail next steps, because we have completed phase 1, we have bridges, we have begun design, DOI has begun design of phase 2, and as you'll see in the 19 draft, that will be complete very, very, very soon, so we're excited about that. So under project implementation reports, important to discuss the progress advanced by the South Florida Water Management District as they submitted a Section 203 report to the ASA, and the ASA submitted that to Congress, and it went to our WRDA of 2018. So that's included there, as well as other work, important work in Sept South, Loxahatchee, Lake Okeechobee, Western Everglades, as well as C111 South Dade post-authorization change report. The fiscal year 20 budget was game-changing. It is incredible to see the president's budget amended to $200 million for fiscal year 20. And if you look at that state of Florida 1920 budget, you know, that's incredible. That $415 million budget for Everglades restoration, you know, those things are going to change the way that we're able to implement. And so looking at the bottom, important to look at the Tamiami Trail next steps. That includes both phase 1 and phase 2. The $100 million from, about $100 million from the state, partnering with DOI. And then, you know, we're incredibly proud of the progress that the Army Corps of Engineers is making in Herbert Hoover Dike, being fully funded now. And I got to visit it yesterday with Lieutenant Colonel Polk, and really good progress. Everyone was excited and you know, targeting 2022, and so that's great to see as well. And then restoration strategies, absolutely fundamental to the success of SERP, and that's also in construction, also funded. So Northern Everglades and Estuaries Protection Plan, which is one of my old labors of love, and so I'm happy to report that's moving forward as well. Okay, so we're going to move forward. If you could pull out the working version of the 2019 IDS. And even though many of us discussed this morning, I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to reiterate it. We look at this as a working version. We don't believe it's perfect. We want to hear your thoughts. We're all still working together with the goal of going to the October task force meeting. And what we see is that the funding levels in fiscal year 20 were game-changing. We see that advancing construction and receiving ecosystem benefits from the Central Everglades Planning Project is possible and achievable because we have Kissimmee River Restoration, because we have Combined Operating Plan, because we have C111 South Dade, Tamiami Trail Next Steps, Mod Waters, and RS making incredible gains, reaching important milestones. That's why we can really focus and shift to Central Everglades. And Central Everglades is one of the projects that brings it all together. One of them, not the only one, but one of the projects that brings it all together. We believe that Everglades science and our scientific community are the key to delivering SERP goals. We believe in making science-informed decisions. And I have an example of that on the working version of the IDS of how we use science to make decisions. And let's keep building on the historic momentum. So as all of you had a chance to take a look at this morning, I want to start with the front page. And as you look at the top line, you'll see that we show fiscal year dollars for 2018, 2019, and 2020 for the breakdown of federal and non-federal. And then for 2021 through 2030, we show a top line number. And the reason for that is that this is a working version. We're still talking through the projects and the final numbers. And so as we do that, we wanted to give you an understanding of what it would take to implement this set of projects in this sequence and these durations. Again, these are not set in stone. These are for our collective discussion. And so you notice that if you look at 2020 and you go down that line, you see progress in foundation. You see one of the changes that I want to make sure you see is that the Tamiami Trail Next Steps Phase 1 is no longer on the IDS because it's complete. So we're focused on Phase 2 and completion of that through 2022. C111 South Dade. So if you look at Mod Waters and you look at C111 South Dade construction, those together are part of the Combined Operating Plan. And so that's why you see those symbols that you can refer at the bottom in the legend. So when you see black, that's the feds doing the work or having the lead. When you see blue, that's the non-feds leading the work. Any questions so far? Actually, I'm going to wait to go to that one. Okay, so one of the important, Pete, to answer your question, when you get more money, what can you move forward? So if you look at the green line, in the green section, projects which were authorized in the 2007 Water Resources Development Act, Indian River Lagoon South is one of the areas where we are very excited to have in the fiscal year 20 president's budget to bring forward. I know several of you sitting in the room, that's near and dear to your hearts. And so you've got a change in the beginning of the design there for C23, 24, North and South reservoirs and the STA. That's one of the benefits of additional funding. Want to make sure I point out that the South Florida Water Management District for 2020 is advancing the design of the C23, C44 interconnect. And if I misspeak, Matt and Jen, please grab that microphone. Let me know. So for the purple, we've got the C43, the projects, that were authorized in 2014. And a C43 reservoir continuing to make important progress there in construction. C111 impoundment, or C11 impoundment, excuse me, too many ones, for design. And then we're really proud of L31 East Flowway for Biscayne Bay Coastal Wetlands. That's one of the areas where I'm looking at Howie and he's nodding at me, where we've made improvements there as well. And so I'm going to skip Central Everglades for a moment and move down to planning. Just let you know that we're still showing the planning projects, including Loxahatchee, Lake Okeechobee, and Western Everglades through 2020. And with the hopes that we could go to Awarda in 2020 as well. But those discussions are to be continued. And certainly we'll discuss that at the task force meeting as well. And then one of the positives of additional funding is advancing Biscayne Bay Coastal Wetlands Phase 2. So you'll notice if you compare the 2019 working draft to the 2018, that's a change. That moved forward. Excited to make sure that I say that we have begun the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual work, and that is sure to keep us busy. And I'm looking at Mr. Suma and Angie there. Will sure to keep us busy through the next few years as we complete Herbert Hoover Dike rehabilitation. So one of the big changes on this page is there's a little table on the bottom right that talks about investments. And the reason that this is in here, although imperfect, the reason it's in here is because many times that you look at the IDS, people will say, okay, you're telling me what you need looking forward, but I don't understand what you've spent. You know, I don't understand how much you've invested. I don't know if you can use it. And so this is our attempt to give you a snapshot in time through fiscal year 18 of what the federal and non-federal agencies have invested in the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Program. And so please note that this includes things more than SERP. And so one of the questions we get a lot is where do you stand on the 50-50 cost share I hear so much about for SERP? So if you look at the CNSF, Central and Southern Flood, so that's the original project of which SERP is a modification. If you look at that row that says CNSF SERP, and you look over to the right, you will see that the total for the federal, this is cost share credit again, making sure we're all on the same page here. Cost share credit through fiscal year 18, 1.3 billion, and the non-fed is ahead and is at almost 1.7. So that's a snapshot in time, certainly not the whole picture. And we tried to capture some of that in the next row. There are significant investments that the state of Florida, the non-federal agencies have made that we expect to be credited, that make that number significantly larger on that side. And again, this is a number that never stops moving because we're all always working. We're always making progress. And so that number, depending on the day and how we're looking at it, changes a little bit. But again, this is a snapshot in time. We get that question a lot. So we're trying to have some transparency there. Any questions on that? Man, you guys are quiet. I love it. Okay, we're going to flip over and talk about building on historic momentum. And Central Everglades Planning Project will allow all of us collectively to see less releases from Lake Okeechobee to the northern estuaries and the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie. Allow more operational flexibility and give Lake Okeechobee a better chance of being a healthier lake. More flow at the right time to the Everglades water conservation areas means that we have a healthier ridge and sluice system. And more flow at the right place for Shark River Slough also means we have a healthier Everglades National Park in Florida Bay, as well as with Taylor Slough. So big picture, on the left, you've got a map of the Central Everglades Planning Project. The reason the map is as large as it is so that we can remind everyone that Sept fits together with the entire system, that we have a system that starts way north of Lake Okeechobee and ties together as we try to implement Central Everglades. So that's kind of why it's as big as it is. And so I have a few slides here that I'm going to try to walk you through Central Everglades that was authorized in 2016, and then the changes that happened in 2018. So I'm going to try to get my laser pointer here. So just to, in the context of the Everglades, you hear a lot about Sept North, Sept South, and Sept New Water. And the giant orange Gantt chart on the right is our attempt at showing you all the different pieces that make up Central Everglades. So every single one of those lines that you see is a project inside of Sept. And so every single one of those lines will have its own design team, its own PDT. And so just to get, again, at the scale of where Sept is trying to take us and building upon the momentum. So I'm going to begin actually here with the second and talk about distribution and conveyance. And so Sept North, if you look over to the right and you look at the middle of the Gantt chart, there is a bold row that says Sept North inflow facilities needed to restore northern WCA 3A and move additional water south to the Everglades. And so Sept North includes improvements in this area that need to be made to the existing system in order to put water in the right place and enough water, that new water that we want to bring and take away from the northern estuaries and move it south and put it here. So those are improvements that if you look on the working version of the IDS, South Florida Water Management District has taken the lead on the entirety of Sept North. So that's why it's all blue. And if you look at the timing of it, by 2025, 2026, it's essentially complete. And so it's important, and I know that's why Jennifer mentioned that this morning, the governor's request to have that recurring funding at those levels. This would allow them to do that level of implementation for Sept North, which is so important. And so, not getting into the specifics, one of the things that I just wanted to make sure that you focus on is Sept North is important for moving water to the right place. Sept South is the key piece of Sept that builds upon the successes of Mod Waters, C111 South Dade, Tamiami Trail, Next Steps, because it adds a way for water to move together with those bridges here on Tamiami Trail. So if I can orient you to Tamiami Trail here. Again, this is where we are in the world on the left, southern part of the system. It provides more water to be able to move from 3A through the levees. And so I'm going to stop here and point at the structure 1, 2, and 3. If you look over at the Gantt chart and you look at Sept South, look at the bold row that says Sept South additional outlet structures needed to move more water south. And you look at about 3 rows down, structure 631 and a gap, and structure 633 and a gap. On this map that you see on the slide, that's 1 and 3. On the map on your IDS, they're actually identified as 631 and 633. Those are, to answer again, where those were advanced with the 200 million. So that's an answer of when we get more money, what can we do? The 200 million includes design of those through 20. So one of the things I want to point out, if you look at that row, design through 2020, and we would award construction at the end of 2020. So it's important from the folks in our engineering, both agencies who really carry all of us. We all make big plans, but engineering actually has to deliver. And so making sure that I'm clear that although we show that kind of split line in 2020 there from design and construction, that occurs in many other places on this IDS that we will update as we go towards the final. You'll see a few more of those kind of split years, just so that you understand that sometimes we work really hard through a whole year in design and then might go to fourth quarter contract award. And so that still counts as fiscal year 20 construction, but it's important to know that it is a continuum. So the Blue Shanty Flowway is something that I wanted to make sure I talked about. And so if you look on the screen, you can see my laser pointer here. It is actually a new levee that would be constructed to coincide with where the bridge, is constructed here. A new structure would be built within the L29 canal. So again, this is the Tamiami Trail. There's the L29 canal to the north of the trail. We would have the new structures, we would have a new levee, and we would create the Blue Shanty Flowway that would allow overland flow and then go under the bridges to provide more water to Northeast Shark River Slough. So if you look at the map and then you look over to the right, under Sept South, that is identified as, if you look at the bottom of Sept South, it says removal L67C and extension and construction of L67D levee. That's the Blue Shanty Flowway. Okay? And that is black because the Corps would take the lead on that in the coming years. So, in the 2016 authorization, Central Everglades had a flow equalization basin. So talking about new water, we first open the bottom of the system, we create improvements in conveyance and distribution in Sept North, and then we go, okay, now I want to go, I'm ready. I think Kara's the one that says it, reservoir ready, right? Okay. I'm reservoir ready, right? So then I can go up to Lake Okeechobee and I can grab a little bit more water. It's not just Lake Okeechobee water that we get to do. There's some timing and there's some other improvements that we get to look at. But where I get to get new water into the system is when I'm ready and I add storage in the system that gives me flexibility to work together with the system in Lake Okeechobee. So that was what was authorized in 2016. And when you look at new water and you look at it to the right, you don't see an FEB, right? And that's because in 2018, we changed the A2 FEB to the deep reservoir, so the EAA reservoir. We added a new stormwater treatment area, and we did canal conveyance improvements to the Miami and the North New River. And so what that did was increase the amount of water that we could deliver to the Everglades protection area. So when you hear us say that, see this red line here? That red line is not a real line in the world. It's kind of like a latitude and longitude. It's something that we put on a map. But it is where all of us come together to agree this is how we measure how much water we're going to put into the Everglades protection area. And so SEP got us 2/3 of the SERP goal across that line into freshwater, more clean freshwater into the Everglades. And the EAA reservoir got us pretty much all the way to the SERP goals. So when you hear the 370,000 acre feet on average annual improvement, when we say that, it's across that red line, and we're saying we're putting that water into the Everglades. So when you look over at the Gantt chart, and you look at the bottom, this is how it's broken out. You've got South Florida Water Management District taking the lead, so it's blue on the seepage barrier that must be constructed here. So again, Tamiami Trail. And you've got a seepage barrier that was included in SEP, and it was included as well in the Packer last year. Because when you put all of that additional water into the system, you've got to worry about how that relates to the human environment between Everglades National Park and to the right. And so there's a seepage barrier already included I think collectively we agree that maybe more would be something that we should talk about outside of SERP to benefit the system, but the authorized project includes a seepage barrier as well. So I want to make sure I talk about that. That's something the Water Management District is looking to begin design in 2020. Then we've got the canal conveyance improvements and the A2 STA, all South Florida working on that, design and construction. And then at the bottom, the last 3 rows, is the Army Corps of Engineers taking the lead on the components that make up the EAA reservoir. And so you look at us going to design in 2020, and that is also part of the additional funding that Howie discussed this morning. That's about $70 million inside of the 200. That's a part of that as well. Do I have any questions so far? Yes, sir.
We're assuming that we're going to have the 200 million. In fact, we don't have a budget yet. All we've got is a committee approval. What's the contingency plan if we don't get it? And we have a continuing resolution.
Well, there you are, being all like serious.
That is an excellent question that I'm not sure I can answer. In terms of a contingency plan, I know that we will focus on the work we started. So we don't want to leave projects half-built. You know, it's important for all of us that are sitting at the table to complete the work that we started. And after that, PETA, you know, I can't really.
And that was really the genesis of my first question. It wasn't that if we had additional money, we move everything forward. Are there specific projects which, if we had a small increment of additional money, we can complete and start getting the benefits? Because one of the problems that we always have is almost finished projects for which we get marginal
Right.
benefits.
Right. Agreed. Yes, sir.
Just building on Pete's comments.
Alan, I'm going to need your help.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I just want to remind everyone to state your name, because this is being webcast and recorded, so if you can introduce yourself. That was Pete Quashis before you.
Guilty as charged.
Indeed, thank you.
James Evans, City of Sanibel. I was just wondering how realistic it is to, funding in the range of 729 to 814 million from 2022 to 2026. I mean, we're struggling to get, 400 million, between the state and federal governments. How realistic is it to get that kind of funding?
It's funny, I get that question, and Howie moves to one of the tables, so I'm going to shoot it to him.
Sure. Howie Gonzalez, Corps of Engineers, Jacksonville. We're challenged with the IDS to show dollar amounts that we feel are necessary to build the projects in a time frame that we feel engineeringly we can get them designed and construction-wise we can get contractors out there to build them. So if we were to work an IDS that capped itself at $150 to $200 million a year, we'd string about 4 11 by 17 sheets together because we tracked about 60 years to get constructed just what we have authorized now. So that's the balance that we're having to strike. Is it realistic that we'll get $800 million in 1 year? We haven't received $800 million in 1 year yet. So going by history, that may not be a reality, but what we're trying to show in the IDS that in order to build these projects in a manner that are going to bring restoration benefits as quickly as we can design and construct the projects, that's the plan that you see.
And I just real quick follow-up. Hopefully the comments that we had during the last meeting will be carried over, but I just wanted to put on the record here, it'd be helpful if we had some way to capture in the IDS, again, either online or on the paper copy, what happens if we don't get that funding? Seeing projects slip in the next iteration of the IDS isn't very helpful for the communities that are advocating for the projects like the C-43 reservoir. So I think it's important to make sure we capture that so we can use that as an advocacy tool to make sure that we're advocating for the funding, to make sure it's staying on track, because, these are big dollar amounts and we need to keep it on track. So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You know what? Ms. Hurd had a comment earlier, and we didn't recognize her. I apologize. Just a moment. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sarah Hurd from Martin County. So I'm looking at the new proposed IDS, and Sept is largely completed by 24-25. My understanding is that Sept was predicated upon, modeled on IRL South, C23, 24, and 25 being completed first. So until and unless those IRL South projects are completed, Sept won't receive the benefits that were promised. I presume that that's why Sept has been advanced, was because of the modeling showed the benefits that it was going to provide, but it's not going to provide those if we don't complete the C23, 24, and 25 first. 23 and 24 aren't supposed to be completed until 27 and 30. Sept is largely going to be completed from in 24, 25. C25 isn't proposed to be completed till 29. So please explain to me why these projects were leapfrogged and what kind of benefits can be expected from Sept, since the projects upon which they were based are not going to be completed.
Thank you for this question, because it's a really important one that I didn't cover as clearly as I probably should have. So if you go to the front page of the IDS and you go to the green area, the projects that were authorized in 2007, that Commissioner Hurd has brought up. This is a common discussion. So what is a predecessor of Sept? If you look at the very last line, that is the predecessor of Sept. The C23, C44 interconnect is actually something that is, I should say, interdependent with Central Everglades Planning Project. The projects that are in the C23, C24, and C25 watersheds are not predecessors of Sept. They did get authorized before Sept did. But the specific item that is needed, and that's actually for a savings clause calculation for Sept, is that very last item right there, ma'am, just to clarify. So we can do them together. Is really the bottom line. We can do them together and still be okay, as long as we keep an eye on C23, C44 interconnect.
This is Mark Perry, Florida Oceanographic. Could you, I'm sorry.
Let's go to Jennifer.
Okay.
Sorry, Mark.
No problem. Sorry, Jen.
Just two comments really quickly and one question. To reiterate a comment we made earlier, but to get it on the record, under the Clusatchee River C43 West Basin Storage, we would like to potentially see a line item added under the pump station reservoir for the C43 Water Quality Treatment Project that is currently initiating a feasibility study to pursue. And then as far as the 50/50 cost share chart, I think that's a really helpful addition, but it is important to relay to the public that it's not 50% all the way, at every moment of every point, but at the end. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand when they see this and feel that somebody hasn't done necessarily their fair share, and that's not always the case. So I do think if we could add a note to clarify that, that would be helpful for the general public. And then the last comment is just following up on something Pete said about if we had more money. I know that we have a lot to undertake, and we certainly understand the scope and scale of these projects, but it is helpful to know where funding, I know it's a challenge to get the funding we need, but some of these projects have been accelerated, like the IRL projects. With the C43 reservoir, this one appears to be delayed. So the question is, if there was additional funding, would we be able to put that back to the original, or at least the most recent completion date, and accelerate that? Or is it an engineering constraint that it absolutely has to be delayed to 2023? We need to know so we can convey that to our constituents.
So I'm going to allow Jennifer Leeds to answer that question, since they are the lead on that project.
Hi. So I think I can maybe address the C-43 comment. It's not that the reservoir has been delayed, it's actually fully funded. The state legislature has been very good about fully funding this project, recognizing the need and the benefit to the Caloosahatchee River. So it's in construction right now. Earlier this year, we awarded probably the largest construction contract the Water Management District has ever let for $525 million. But when you get into construction, sometimes things will come up. You may have weather, you may have differing site conditions with construction, and as they get out there and they start seeing what they're going to be doing and mobilizing, it may stretch out some of the completion dates a little bit, but it's not delayed. They're moving forward as fast as they can, and the project itself is fully funded.
Ed?
And just to add to that, just if you'll remember, on the IDS previous to the 2018, it was actually 2026 completion. The South Florida Water Management District, working with DEP, pushed to get the legislature to provide the full funding in advance, so we were able to pull it forward by the years we were. You know, but it is a fully funded after this session project. So funding isn't holding up, it's simply just Mother Nature that's going to hold that project up if there's any delays at this point.
So just to clarify, more money would not
It's fully funded.
to put it back to the
No.
2022?
No, it's fully funded, so you can't move that one forward anymore.
Good to know, thank you.
Yeah,
Mark Perry?
Thank you, Mark Perry, Florida Oceanographic. Just to follow up on the C-23, 24 issues and stuff, I know that the new schedule kind of bumps out the end of the construction in about 2 years on both C-23 and 24, but it adds also, 4 years to the planning of the C-23, 24 reservoir project. So that's interesting that you had to add years to the planning process when originally it was 3 years, now it's 7 years. But the point on the interconnect, the C-23, 44 interconnect, that's kind of new to this schedule. And am I questioning, is that what you're calling the southern diversion component of the IRL South? What is the C-23/44 interconnect, and what is that? Can you explain that?
You can't hear me very well, but I'm going to move over so I can try to show it.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. So where is it? I'll start there, Mark. So there is a proposed connection between the C-44. This is very hard to see.
That's
I'm going to
okay.
do something
Just
else.
explain it, I'll understand where you're talking.
It's an actual conveyance connection between the C-23, a little bit towards the east, maybe a little bit east of...
Well, it's on the IRL South plan that
Yes.
shows a southern diversion, it's called. And if that's the canal you're talking about, or the connection between C-23 south to the C-44, if it's called an interconnect now, just tell me that southern diversion that's listed on the plan at the Corps' website for IRL South is now called the interconnect, and explain how that is the interdependent thing for, implementing Sept. That's what I need to know.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm going to make Matt answer that question.
Oh, okay.
So yes, those features are one and the same. The southern diversion is identified in IRL South. The interconnect is identified in the Central Everglades Planning Project. The Sept that was authorized in 2016, as modified by the Packer in 2018, requires that interconnection to provide reasonable assurances that we won't adversely affect water supply for users of Lake Okeechobee. So when there are opportunities, when local rainfall occurs, water could be diverted from the IRL South project down into the C-44 canal from the north, and then move back west to the lake to maintain levels in the event the lake stages begin to drop as we send more water south. So it's really an interconnection that provides the reasonable assurances that we're maintaining water supply for other water-related needs as required by the federal program.
Just, I mean, to understand that, the continuation of that was, you know, when that, and we were around when IRL South was being developed, you know, and it's interesting that that diversion canal was discussed, and it was discussed even about going one way or the other, or just one way, and that's from C-23 down to C-44. So as you're describing, you're saying part of the savings cost necessary for Sept has to be that this water is available for that connection back to the lake, so that in case you need a water shortage demand because of the Sept project is going to incur that water shortage, then we need to have this additional water availability through this southern diversion, or now called the C-23-44 intercept.
That's correct. We recognize that in IRL, there's too much water making its way to the upper, the middle, and the lower estuary. The storage facilities in IRL South will capture that water and keep it from going to the estuary itself. It'll deliver that water back to the system when the canal levels start to get low. And it's a safety valve, for lack of better words, to take excess water that IRL does not need and move it back to the lake in the event that we're sending large amounts of water south from Lake Okeechobee and get ourselves into a situation where it compromises water supply.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry it takes some time.
Not at all, that's why we're here. Okay, so, yes, sir.
Bob Johnson, National Park Service. So when we're accelerating the S631, 632, 633 that are all scheduled to be done in 2022, we don't yet have an outlet from Water Conservation Area 3B to go anywhere. That's 4 years later, something like that. So are we thinking about what potential impact that'll have on water levels in 3B?
Yes.
Which may end up probably constraining the inflows? Or do we have a plan for how to get any water we put in through those structures out again?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's why they come together with some gaps that are not necessarily the full removal
Okay.
of the gap levy. And then in addition to that, we are talking about whether we would need pump stations, temporary pumps, to be able to move the water into the L29. So yes, we are thinking about that. That's part of the ongoing engineering discussion.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And the gaps in L29 would be part of the L29 levy removal component?
Right.
Just an earlier,
The gaps,
Piece
so
of it.
let me clarify. The gaps would be in the L67C that would come together with the structures. And then we would need to look at potentially temporary pumps to get the water into the L29. Yes, we are definitely looking at that.
okay. Thank you.
Kelly Ralston with the American Sport Fishing Association. I really appreciate, kind of the timeline that's set out with the funding levels that we are assuming. And from the conversations that I've had with policy folks up in DC, I think we're probably in good shape for next year as well for 200 million, just tentatively speaking. I mean, I think they recognize the importance, and then obviously we have an election and we'll see what happens after that. But one thing that would be helpful in conversations that I have with policymakers is to know what projects would be hindered, which is kind of the opposite of what we've been talking about, if that funding goes away. So what things slow down, what is really contingent on maintaining that funding moving forward? And I don't know if, I don't think that's necessarily something to put on the IDS, but definitely a concept to
Information.
think about, yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so real quick, just to make sure we're looking forward, we are going to continue to work on the 2019 update to the IDS in the next several weeks.
with the goal of presenting the final at the October 29th task force meeting in Washington, D.C. And that wraps up my presentation for today. Yes.
Are we okay with some questions now, or is that all right? I don't know, yeah.
Mark? Yeah, go ahead. Go,
Thank you,
please.
Mark Perry. Just, you know, the concern of going forward, and it is a plan, you know, the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan. And we know that when we went into Sept, for instance, we were combining a lot of components together. And I know you've got the column down there for the Yellow Book components. And when we track those or we follow those, or we look at, we've got about 12 or 13 components out of the original 68 kind of underway or going through, it'd be really helpful to kind of track that a little bit. And I know that that's hard to do because those components are now being integrated into one thing called Sept, for instance, or those components, like in the IRL South, there were two original components, the C2324 and the C44. And so those are two of the original 68. There are others that, you know, were tracked through, but it'd be nice to know, because people still ask. There are people that have been around since then, and they continue to ask, well, how many of those original components have we completed? And when we all look to Melaleuca eradication as kind of like one of the things that we worked on and may be completed, we really aren't completing, and that gets to the point of, gee, well, shouldn't we ought to complete some of these projects, being that we've had word authorizations, you know, that we're going to be every 2 years, but then started from 2000 to 2007, 7 years later, and then 7 years later we got 14, and now finally we're into 2016, 2018, and 2020. Hopefully we're on a 2-year track, and this will help us to get that. And I just, it would be appreciative if we kind of reconciled it a little bit back to the Yellow Book to see where we are with that. The other thing is, there's always, future funding is always in, you know, in limbo. You never know what we're going to get. But I think that the questions and concerns were like knowing what we need, or if we need this to stay on this schedule to complete these projects the way they're shown, and you've outlined that, then that's the target we need to go to ask our state and our federal partners to go, let's get this money and let's get it allocated at that level in order to achieve this restoration schedule. And that's my understanding. So if that is the case, sure, 800, you know, has never been realized before, but it's not unachievable. I mean, we could, you know, Christmas is coming. I mean, you could ask for it and see where we could go. But I mean, if we don't know that's the number, then we don't know what to ask for. And I think that's the point. Is 200 enough for each of us to throw in and get this done? Well, it's a great level, it's a record level, it's a great start, and if we're consistent with it, it's going to be a lot more improved over previous years than they started. But if we need more than that, and we can achieve more than that, and we can ask for more than that, and show that it's going to implement and going to do this, that's valuable. But it's showing that, look, if we plug that number into here, we're going to get this done. So the two big lines for me on that project are these 2 or 3 upper lines that show the funding. You know, that's what it gets down to, how much we can plug into there and get really done. And I know all of us are working on these projects, trying to get it done and implemented as soon as possible so we can achieve the result that we're all looking for in less than a 20 or 30-year time frame. And to do that, we got to get on this schedule and get on it hard. Thanks.
So I would just like to point out something that can help you with the folks that are wanting to do that. You know, on the front, we have the total what it would take every year for all the projects on the IDS, including Sept. And then when you flip it over to Sept, you'll see how much of those dollars are directly related to Central Everglades. And it's a big chunk. It's a very expensive project. So you can make the case, if we don't get it, here's the things that are going to move out and shift to the right. Just so you can do the math between what's on the front and what's on the back and see how much is Sept, how much are the other projects, and just wanted to point that out for some of you that are looking for that kind of information.
Kim, can we talk around that point just a little bit? I want to clarify it for myself, and if I have a question, I think maybe others might have. I'm looking at this, and we got potentially a $200 million federal investment this year in 2020. Brings us the total planning estimated cost down to 456. When you get out to 2022, it's 814. And that is to maintain the rate of project and planning that's laid out on this schedule, correct?
Yeah, so let's go to there. So what did you say, the 800 million? So that's to wrap up Picayune, continue construction on IRL South North, and continue construction on the C-2324 STA.
C-2324.
And the C-11 impoundment, and Spreader Canal Western, but you
Seepage
flip
management.
over to, what year are we on? 2023?
2022.
Or 2023 was the 800 million.
2023.
You see, 524 of that is for SEP.
Okay.
Okay, and the difference between what's on the front page for that year and SEP is what it takes to do all the rest of the stuff.
To do the rest of the programs.
So does that help, folks? And that if you can see, if you don't get it, these are, things are going to shift out, and SEP being a big number, if, we don't get as much, then that really shifts out.
Kim, that helps me, thank you.
Great.
I had one more comment, Mark, to your 68 component. We are very much tracking that. It is a tool that wasn't quite ready and really doesn't fit on the IDS, which is why I was kind of trying to focus all on what's, the IDS as a look forward for execution. But we do need a tracker. We need another companion document that helps us keep track of, we had all these things in the yellow book, where are they? And we do have a draft of that. We've been working on it with South Florida Water Management District. It just isn't quite ready to launch, but very, very well taken, because it is something that we're on it. It's just not in the IDS yet,
Thank you, Mr.
Go ahead, Mark. Is that a follow-up on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just real quick, a couple of years back, the district actually had a colored kind of map of all the projects underway, similar to what's on the IDS thing, but it was also a priority. They looked at actual priorities of what projects were. And it kind of gave us an idea of what priority we need to set. And when we started to revise the IDS a couple of years back and put at the bottom of the IDS the white area where we're doing planning, and those white areas at the bottom were put on, we were always asking, well, who made that decision? Who makes the decision to start the planning on the next project? Or who makes the decision on where priorities need to be to advance this project versus another project? And so that's kind of, according to the schedule, this is what we plug in, this number of funding, we get these things going, and they stay on the scheduled track. But if we get less funding, somebody's got to make a decision about where that's going to go, or how much we're going to apply. And if we can't apply it to that project, is there a system or a process by which the Corps or somebody looks at, okay, we have this amount of funding, and we need to, apply it to some of these projects to keep them going, but which ones are we going to not go, or do you just evenly cut it across the board, or you evenly, okay, so if you could.
I will say it's iterative. It's iterative.
Okay.
It isn't, there isn't a perfect, although we love process, there isn't a perfect process chart that we follow. It is something that is an ongoing discussion, and what's already started is pretty important. Finishing the stuff we've started.
Sure.
Is at the top of that heap.
And there have been in our recent history these opportunities that come up, within the state, for instance, to do initiatives, to put things forward, and that bounces up to the federal, say, yeah, let's put that up in there, move that, advance that project planning and get that done quicker. So there are these opportunities, and we understand that. So it has to be some sort of perhaps iterative process, that rather than a hard and fast process of determination of priority.
Yeah, so I would just add to that, Mark, that when we did the big process workshop for the IDS, and I think that was 2015, I can't remember, getting old. that gave us the short list of what did people think were important to work on next for the planning phase. And so we're still working off that. And then you'll see things, the other, how we get funded to do another study is, for instance, I'll give Biscayne Bay Coastal Wetlands Phase 2. That got put up and requested, and we were given the go-ahead to launch on that. So that's the way that happens. We need to hear from folks of what they think are important on the next things to start planning and advocate and hear who advocates to do those things. Yeah.
We got a couple people in line here. Bob Johnson? And then Kara Kaplan.
Kind of following up on one of the questions that Mark asked, the heavy lift between 2022, well, beginning in 2022 versus 2020. Is the core, first of all, we fund almost everything in SERP, in the Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Program within the core, but we do so many projects that have major benefits for water supply and flood control. Is the core thinking about opportunities to look at funding for some of the stuff that we do, or carving out things that we do that actually have primarily water supply and flood control benefits, to look at other opportunities to find funding that is not in the Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Program? Because I just think we're chasing after a very small pot of money, and we're being, in our own case, very restrictive on what we're calling ancillary benefits versus real live. You are implementing the Lower East Coast Water Supply Plan in this project. You are. And you're doing that for the next 30-plus years, but you're not charging it to a water supply component. You're charging it to a restoration component. How do we kind of change that dynamic so we're looking in the right pots of money here? Yeah, the right different pots of money. And the other part of this is when we were looking at Tamiami Trail next steps, it was pretty obvious that the state of Florida has a $91 billion FY19, FY20 budget in transportation, of which $34 billion is general revenue. Think about options where other agencies are doing things that are linked to this and put together that partnership, because lots of times we're doing things that are together, and this is like rounding error in some other budgets, the small amounts we're talking about. Are there things we can do to talk about opportunities so we're not just keep looking at the same dollars that we're competing with all the other restoration projects?
Kara Cap, and then Pete.
Thanks, everyone. This is definitely an exciting tone to have for this type of IDS workshop versus others in the past where they've been more combative because there's more funds to go around. So I'm hearing from a lot of people requests for different types of tools to communicate. I heard the request for what would not be funded if we didn't get this. What I'm wondering if the Corps has, and hopefully I think this would be maybe one of the easier things, is at the start of looking into the fiscal year, the president's initial budget was $63 million. And Congress stepped in and our senators stepped in and the president revised his request, which was amazing. I think we all were glued to Twitter that day. And so is there a clear showing of what extra gets funded this year between that $63 million and $200 million? What would the Corps have done if we had that other funding level? What are we getting done because we got $200 million? That would be a very compelling argument to share with our decision makers, because I know just from my looking at these forms, one project in particular that MPCA is very excited about is the Broward County Water Preserve project moving forward. So previously under the $63 million budget, that project had a $0 budget, and now it's getting more significantly funded. Broward County Water Preserve Area is a precursor to Sept. So again, that is reservoir ready, right? We need this to move more water south, and we would have had zero progress, and now we're going to start having significant progress. So if it's possible to see that difference between $63 million budget and $200 million budget, that would be a really helpful tool for us.
And so, Howie, I think that there was a presentation given to the working group with the $63 million that you can go back and get online, Kara, the previous presentation, when we had the $63 million, and you'll see the list of what that would what we'd be working on and then compare it to what we're saying today with this presentation.
Yes, this is Howie Gonzalez, Corps of Engineers. I believe it was the June meeting when I couldn't give the details on the 200. Then the previous meeting would have been, I believe, when I would have presented the $63 million plan. But ultimately, that information is available. We had a $63 million plan developed. We always keep a bigger picture plan in the works, and ultimately that gets scaled down to whatever it gets scaled down to. So, you know, at this point, we're able to flex up to the $200 million plan because we had already prepared a plan to meet those numbers. So being able to see the $63 million plan, we have the $200 million plan, it's pretty clear what things were added, definitely.
Sorry, that would be somewhere on the evergladesrestoration.gov website somewhere, if I...
Yeah, and you said it was not the most recent meeting, but the one prior, the working group?
I think it was 2 prior working groups, yeah.
Okay.
And Howie, isn't that information also publicly available in our justification sheets that we provide? Because the original justification sheet would have had the 63 million, and then the revised justification sheet has the new numbers for 200, which is quite detailed.
Right, so the original justification sheet would have showed the 63 million. At this point, we haven't updated the justification sheet to show the 200 million. There was some discussion on whether that would be required or not, and at this point, OMB is not requiring an update to the J sheet. So a couple of different data points out there to be able to show that.
Pete?
In last year's Tallahassee budget, $50 million was appropriated for north of the lake projects. And I think the anticipation was that they would be components that we would see in the Lake O Watershed Protection Plan, but we would seek a pre-authorization agreement for cost share to move forward with that. Is that 50 million, which is cash in hand, reflected in the IDS? And if not, why not?
Hey, Pete, it's Jennifer, leads the Water Management District. So the Lake O Watershed Protection Project has not been authorized by Congress yet, so that's one of the reasons why it's not shown on the sheet. But for the Water Management District side, we do have that in our budget and are fully prepared to move forward on that and spend those dollars on October 1. So we are looking at focusing on the ASR technology, similar to what Matt actually had described this morning in his presentation. We're looking at rehabilitating some existing ASR sites and doing a siting analysis to put some additional ASR wells in there north of the lake associated with the LOAP program.
Well, that it could be a blue line rather than a black line, but it seems that it should be somewhere in the chart, because it's something we're actually going to do, you know.
We'll go to Kim first.
I think you're just reminding us to remind everyone else that the stuff that's in planning phase and not yet authorized, the cost for that construction is not represented in the top dollars here. So wanted folks to, just quick reminder.
But this is Ed Smith, DEP. Kim, wouldn't it be correct to say that if that were to be the case, this would be updated in futures and it would just be reflected in that? So it would be there. We'd get credit for it. It's just, right now, it's not authorized, so it's appropriate to kind of not include it.
So if the project becomes, when the project becomes authorized, that money has been invested, those reflections would happen in a future update to this. Theoretically, yeah. Okay. And I would like to point out, Pete, that that information was included in Matt's presentation earlier today to the working group meeting. Rebecca?
Yeah, it's just a programmatic comment. I mean, I understand that water supply is smaller volumes of water in many areas, but it is a comprehensive plan, and it was meant to address other water-related needs along with restoration projects. And there were some really good reasons for doing that as far as making it all work together. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a good thing, and that we should be working more on the mutually beneficial parts of the program.
Adam?
Thanks. A great discussion. It seems like the largest constraint is funding, not individual components of specific little, portions of the projects. And, it's an interesting topic of how to align when we get the money where it goes, and one of the challenges that I'm faced with is delivering reports, and some of those reports are really focused on, and that focus is on indicator species. That we're not, that we still have a lot of red species in the red. And it would be my, suggestion to put out there that when people think about projects of how to prioritize them, that there's some type of dialogue or consideration for indicator species, and we start turning those from red to yellow and hopefully eventually to green, because that's what helps with the funding, that we're able to show that we're making progress towards restoration of those that are not down here. And the significance of that report is, to me, from what I hear in the conversations and the dialogues that I've been involved in, and I understand that we have geographical influences, but some of those things come back to ecological indicators that keep that money, going, where people see that are not here on the ground, that are not out there seeing the projects or out fishing or hunting or, involved going to, volunteer work, and seeing it, that they're reading it and they see all the red, and so just something to consider while we're talking about the IDS and how we apply in future projects. Thank you very much. Great discussion.
Nyla?
I don't know if there's an appropriate time to bring it up, but I did just want to remind everybody as we talk about funding, St. Lucie County was able to get that $1 million sitting there in their budget again this year. But that is something that they have been doing for several years, waiting for what they can do to help with C23, C24 reservoirs. So if there's anything we can do to maybe look creatively and start applying that money towards something, I think that that would be very helpful. Thank you.
I just want to follow up on Adam's comment, and I think the emphasis in the IDS on Sept is very well placed, and it's connected to the existence of all those red indicator species, because Sept really covers most of the Everglades, and with all the, I think attention today, you saw on the current success or promise of Mod Waters, that's like just the past couple years. So we're really just beginning to have an impact on the park, south of Tamiami, which is connected to success in Water Conservation Area 3. And Sept really is the next big step there. So I think the finding, in the report card in particular, you see how much red there is, how the indicator species we have, and for the system-wide indicators as well. It's an effective warning, that we've created, for decades, created a problem that we're only now addressing at the scale necessary to resolve it. So I think actually it kind of is a check, a confirmation that our priorities, by having Sept queued up, despite those huge budgets required, is appropriate. And we're doing what we can, and I think we're doing it the right way. We all wish we could do it faster, and if we figure out how to do it faster, great. But I think that this is all connected. The indicator species, it's good to have a reminder that we should keep an eye on our indicator species and always kind of question whether we have the best indicators, the ones that are guiding us the best. So that's good, Adam. I mean, I think it's not the outcome we want right now, but hopefully it'll be the future outcome that we'll be pleased with.
Thank you.
Mark Berry?
Well, I know it's a kind of a broad comment or situation, but, when we were around in 2000 and signing the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan, I recall that people were, saying, oh, great, okay, we're all done, yay, we can walk away, the Everglades are restored. But we try to indicate, this is going to take 20 plus years to try to implement all this. And, here we are with a 2030 timeframe in front of us that says by 2030, we're hopefully going to have, maybe 14 or so of these components done. But, what about the rest of it? How much are we going to keep projecting out that, it started out at $7.4 billion and now it's like 10 or 12 billion and keeps getting bigger and more expensive. And as you know, on all these kind of construction projects or all these regional projects and things, the more we wait, the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to be. And so we can keep pushing this out and keep going forward, but we also, and we got to keep pushing to get this components done that we have on this schedule. Don't misunderstand me. I'm just trying to say that some of us are not going to be around by the time we kind of finally have the final groundbreaking on the final project for a comprehensive Everglades restoration plan. And that's unfortunate, because I would like to pass on, at least to the kids or my grandkids, that, hey, we really had worked on this. It took a long time, but we finally got, restoration to the Everglades. And this is really important to understand the big picture of it, because that's what we were working on back 18, 19 years ago in year 2000. We were all hopeful that, yes, this is going to do it. This is going to really be component. And we tried to convince the people walking away saying, okay, we're all done. It's not done. We've got to get after it. And each project has to come back and get congressional approval, authorization, and fast track. And I was so glad in recent years when the Corps sat down and said, this taking 7 years to get this planning done and projects done is not acceptable. And they fast-tracked it to the 3-year, $3 million, let's get it done. And that's what we got on our schedule now. So the future components and the things that we get going, let's get them on a schedule, let's get them going. Let's look ahead to really try to complete the entire program and get this done. At some point in the future, I don't say whether it's 2060 or 2090, but, we got the opportunity, and, it's going to be billions and billions of dollars. But the longer we wait, the more that figure goes up. And so it just points to the fact the sooner the better we can get it done. And the Everglades needs it. This is our last shot, just like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas said, this is it. We got one chance to save this system, and it's in front of us, and we got to start working on it real hard. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Bob?
Bob Johnson, National Park Service. That sort of reminds me of the conversation we had before when the Corps' appropriation process sort of said, if you don't get projects from authorized to appropriated in so many years, you have to deauthorize them. And a lot of the projects that are not on the IDS are in that land of wandering around somewhere. Are they going to be deauthorized? Have we replaced them with something else? I'll use an example of the southern estuaries. The benefit to the southern estuaries was not Sept and running water through the conservation areas. It was capturing storage in the lake belt and then sending it southward to Biscayne and Everglades National Park. And no matter how much we do a great job with Sept, it's still only a fraction of the water that we would have gotten out of that project component. It's gone now from at least our thinking, because it's not even in the chart till 2030. It'd be nice just to spend some time thinking about what we're doing, as Mark said, with the other projects. And have we figured out which ones clearly need to be deauthorized? I'll use an example of the Bird Drive recharge area. I think we've stuck a fork in that one, it's not going anywhere. And, we've got an idea of how we're replacing it. But there's a lot of ones out there. I just don't know if, we're very far along. If it's a technology limitation and we can't do it, we should say so, But something that deals with those out projects, and you made it sound like there was a plan you were working on just to document all those projects. That'd be nice to know where we are. And then nice to know what benefits are or not coming, let's say, because of that change.
So if I may, I just wanted to speak a little bit, try to be a little optimistic. So two things. One is, as we look at what's on the IDS to design and construct, right, what's on the Gantt chart, and then what's in the white part,
I would tell you that we've done enough modeling and science and understanding that as the system comes together, as we tie Lake Okeechobee Watershed Restoration Project with Sept, with Kissimmee, with C-44 and C-43, we are going to achieve the SERP goals for reducing Lake Okeechobee releases to those estuaries, right? It is within our sights. The planning efforts that we have as they come together to work with the projects as a system, those SERP goals are within our sights. And so I would hope that we're optimistic about that as we continue to try to push these projects forward. And also to Rebecca's point, as a system, not any one thing, as all of us together having those benefits and prosperity from the implementation of SERP. I would say that SERP is a piece of the puzzle. It is a huge piece, but I think it's important for all of us to remember that, Martin County is implementing incredible ecosystem restoration projects at the local level. All of it works together. The same with Lee County, the same with all the local projects that get funded with additional revenue sources that fit together with the BMAP process that DEP leads. There's a lot more than what's on here that we can be optimistic about, and that little by little we can get that incremental restoration. And so to Bob's point, I agree that it's important to keep all those Yellow Book components, on our minds, and it is something that, every year we look at this IDS and we try to force it to be a summary of the entire program, and it just isn't, right? We need to focus on what's coming, but there is a need for that companion document that tells us we had 68 components. We've either designed, planned, or in construction a pretty large percentage of the number of components are actually either on here or in planning. And so just getting that sense of, yes, it feels really big, but we've made significant progress. That's actually what's in that SISREP report all of you have, and the tables as well, just to try to bring a little optimism.
And I guess just want to make one point on that. As you know, we've hired Ava Velez to come work with us in West Palm. And our colonel has the foresight to realize we need additional capacity to kind of start doing these kind of things you're talking about. And so we're very happy that we are expanding our bandwidth to be able to do those kinds of things and look forward with the program.
Jennifer?
Jennifer Hecker with the CHNP. I think to the point, though, that Bob's making, which is a really important one, is just like public perception when they look at these documents and what they are going to take away. And are they going to look at this as being the complete plan or not? Are there things that aren't captured? How do we make that clear that there is more beyond this? When we say this is looking forward, well, this is looking forward to the immediate future, maybe not the entire future of even SERP. So one thing that caught my eye also in the amounts is that after 2023, they start to go down. And that's based on this project matrix. But I think, with what Bob just said, there are other needs and other projects that could be teed up so that we don't send the message to policymakers that this is just going to be a ramp up for a couple of years and then it's going to go way back down. I wouldn't want them to take that away by looking at these numbers. I would want them to maybe see asterisks after the high point where it says these projects, but note additional SERP projects may be coming online that would need the balance of funding so that, they can anticipate that they're going to have to ramp up and sustain that for a long period to complete out SERP. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's such a good point, because one of the things that I think we could do better is explain that the white part is what will feed that, right? That planning within our sites is what then backfills the need moving forward, and we try to do that, but we could be better. That's a very good suggestion.
Yeah, I just think the bottom line is like that third row across, looking at that spike up and then go dramatically all the way back down to lower than where we're at now. How do we finesse that to make it clear to people that that's not the reality that we're likely facing?
Yeah, particularly when we're talking about seeking authorization for another $4 billion worth of projects north and west of the lake. We ought to reflect that if in fact we get those authorizations, we're going to have to fund the projects that are in those. And this, I think Jennifer's point is well taken. This indicates that we haven't put that into the matrix for the future funding that is going to be required.
Can I ask another process question? Is the point of today to actually, I know you're gathering input, but are you also going to be looking for public comment in writing after today? And then what is the time frame that you need this input to finalize this document in order to have it ready for the next meeting?
So the purpose of today is for you to see us work and make sure that we're transparent so that you know how much effort goes into actually developing. When we publish an IDS, there have been versions upon versions that we all talk about because every single one of these lines has a whole slew of considerations, right? And so that really the purposes today is for you to see how we do it and to be open. I'm happy to receive comments as soon as possible. They can be in writing. That would be my preference so that we can keep track of them. And that way we will report them to the task force and explain what we've heard. I cannot promise that every single thing will be addressed, but we will certainly report it as received and explain what people's priorities are and what we've heard so far.
And Ava, to clarify on that, the process that we've done today, the information from here, we will provide to the Corps and the Water Management District. Any comments made after that should go directly, they wouldn't come through us. This is a concise workshop, so it would need to go directly to the Corps. Yeah, just wanted to make sure that any additional comments outside of this meeting would need to go a different path. That makes sense. Okay, well, and with that, that's actually what I was going to talk about with the feedback loop, to remind everyone that we will be bringing this forward at the October task force meeting. The information from today will be up on our website. The presentations are already posted on our website. When the recording is available, that will also be added, so you can look for that to be, information to be there. And also, gentle reminder, make sure you signed in. You don't have to sign in more than once, but please sign in once so we have a good, accurate report of today's efforts. And thank you all for participating. I also, before closing comments by the other folks here at the table, I just wanted to really thank the Water Management District staff. They really helped turn this room around and get us set up. So thank you to Henry in the booth and Elon and her staff, because they really made this happen, having 2 back-to-back meetings. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan, for acknowledging that, and thanks to the Corps for all the work they've put in to get us to where we're at with the IDS, working with the state partners to get here. And thank you all for coming to the workshop to hear your input on this and participating in the process. We do appreciate that. Alan? Adam?
Yeah, sorry to belabor this, but Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds, if I could, do you have any closing comments? It was with your kind of guidance that, wanted to have this public engagement to, there was the last task force meeting that was, yeah, but it was also brought up at the task force to have this IDS. Ms. Estenos, along with Mayor Ruane and Noah Valenstein, all spoke about, wanting to have this kind of IDS discussion. And so appreciate this opportunity. I've learned a lot, as always, so, I don't know.
Yeah, just thanks to everyone who came. It's really important to us and the Water Management District to have input. We know that this is a lot of information that we're giving everybody today, and so we knew that there would be some comments today, but that there would be subsequent comments as you're able to digest and really get into the numbers and do some of the math, subtracting the back page from the front page and taking a look at the 63.5 compared to the 200 and all of that. And we're not trying to be deceptive in not doing the math for you, but any way that you do the math, you make value judgments, right? And so we didn't want to preclude people's value judgments and presume how to do the math for others. And so that's kind of why we presented it the way that we did. But we fully expect to have Ava's inbox get filled up by people's comments and questions as you digest the information. So please feel free to reach out to us for clarification on any of those questions that you've asked today. If when you look at the resources, there are things missing, don't leave Matt Morrison out of your email box messaging for questions for the state funding or Jennifer for priorities coming from the state. Because really our agencies are working together, but there is, you would be probably astounded to have an inside view on how often the technical teams have been meeting the last couple of weeks to try and get this far. Because it is really challenging when you start to look at cost share balance, when you start to look at capabilities of the different agencies, timings, permitting, land acquisition, and trying to sequence all of that in order to be not just effective and deliver as many benefits as early as possible, but to be efficient with both the workforce, the time, and the money that we have available. And so we certainly don't know all the answers, but we are working really hard to come up with a way to move forward that does deliver benefits to the ecosystems, but all of the water users across South Florida. So thanks again for participating, and we look forward to your additional comments in the future.
Thanks, Jennifer. And just a reminder, as you leave the room, this is definitely going to be an agenda on task force. So if you find yourself going on October 29th or 28th up to Washington, this will be a briefing there as well for the task force members. So that's all. Thank you very much. Thank you, the Corps. You guys done great. It's a big lift. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.